physics, which is, about technology, and you can't just be in the techno world to understand this, and neither can you just be in the biological world to understand this. You actually have to understand an area of science called biophysics. It talks about how physical processes that physicists explore can actually affect biological processes. And we talked a bit before about moving charges, and that's the underlying mechanism. A lot of the underlying mechanisms are based on moving charges and electromagnetic fields that are being responded to by human biology and other areas of biology and nature. So if you can understand the concept of resonance, most people understand that concept. It's a famous story where there was a bridge in Manchester in 1831 where soldiers were marching across the bridge in step, and the bridge started to vibrate up and down and up and down and up and down, to the point where the connections between the molecules making up the structure of the bridge broke down, because that frequency was a frequency that weakened them, and the bridge collapsed. And after that, troops have always been instructed to break step when they cross bridges so that they don't set up a resonance frequency. Well, a similar thing actually happened in 1940 with a bridge in the US called the Tacoma Bridge, when there was a 42-mile-an-hour wind that actually made the bridge vibrate up and down, and the bridge collapsed. Fortunately, no one was killed, but it shows you that frequency and resonance can be an important factor in changing how the connections between molecules can break down, and that can affect really important structures, not just in the physical world, but also in the biological world. So we look at an electromagnetic wave. An electromagnetic wave it has an electrical part, which goes up and down and up and down, and it has a magnetic part, a magnetic field that goes at right angles from side to side. And in fact, if you have, and it's created by it can be created by an oscillating charge here. And when that charge keeps oscillating up and down in exactly the same direction, which is called, it's polarized, it means that everything's happening in the same direction, then the wave is always going up and down in the same plane. The electric field is going up and down the same plane, and the magnetic field is going in the same plane. And in fact, the electric field, a moving electric field, oscillating electric field, creates a magnetic field, and vice versa. And a very clever man called Maxwell discovered that, and in fact showed that electromagnetic fields can travel in a vacuum. You don't need any, that is, you don't need any substance, that the electric field can create the magnetic field, which then creates the electric field, and so it's self-propagating through space. And this understanding basically was what led to the telecommunications revolution. We could say radio waves, and then high frequency waves across the planet using this understanding. And it's also how we heat our food in the microwave, because we have an electromagnetic wave that's just at the right wavelength for the size of the microwave, so that the water molecules inside, say, the piece of meat, vibrate up and down, because the water molecules have got a negatively charged oxygen and two more positively charged hydrogen atoms. And this is called, you can see there's kind of it's called a dipole. So this side of the molecule is slightly negative and this side's slightly positive. So when you've got a wave coming in, positive, negative, then the negative is going to be attracted to the positive, and the positive is going to be attracted to the negative, and this can vibrate the water molecule up and down. There's also other types of vibrations that happen, but the vibrating water molecules is what causes heat, and that's what heats your food in the microwave. You can see that when, like before, when talking about if you start vibrating the molecules around, water actually has its structure. And that is the hydrogen bonds from one molecule. Whoops, sorry. So this hydrogen bond here from this molecule, from this particular molecule, combination here, is actually being attracted to the oxygen. That's a positive charge. It's being attracted to the negative oxygen of another molecule. And you see, so this is creating weak bonds across each of the water molecules that gives water a structure. And in fact, there's even more complex structures in water. There's a fourth phase of water now called, which is also called structured water. But if you start vibrating them, you start moving them around, then you're going to break these bonds down, and the water's going to lose its structure. And that's a problem. And it's also a problem in proteins, because the same thing in proteins, along you have all the amino acid chains all being joined together, but proteins fold. They fold once and then twice and three times. They fold to give their structure. And those folds are held together by these weak bonds across the folds. And if you start vibrating the molecules, you'll break down those bonds, and therefore, which are required for the folding, and then you end up getting proteins being unfolded or denatured. And this is a problem because proteins make up a lot of what's in our body. For example, collagen is a protein, and collagen is the basis of muscles, tendons, round tendons and flat tendons, ligaments, and bone. And so a lot of what makes up our structure is actually made of collagen. And if that starts to break down, then we start breaking down our structural integrity. Once you get you start to break down bonds and hydrogen bonds between things, well, then you can start to get as well as getting water rearranged and protein unfolded, you can get DNA damage, which leads to altered gene transcription. That means that, once I was talking about before, the recipe is changed on what the genes are telling the proteins to make, how to make themselves, and this leads to cancer. Now, here's an example. This is a vitamin D receptor protein that's being modelled by an Australian scientist, Trevor Marshall. And he's a computer model, but he's actually shown, you can see this is the protein, and it's vibrating all the time. But here, these little hydrogen molecules it's called the vitamin D ligand. So it's where the vitamin D receptor is receiving vitamin D. And these are actually, they have their own vibrational, their own resonant frequency that they vibrate at. And that is interfered with by 3, 5, and 6 gigahertz frequencies. Now, what are they? They're the frequencies of telephone communication signals and modems. And what happens then is that this changes the ability of the vitamin D. So here, what it is, vitamin D receptor, it can no longer receive vitamin D. So a lot of people are finding today that their vitamin D is low. And it's possible it's not just because of lack of sunlight, especially here in Australia. It could be that we are actually seeing interference of this by the ubiquitous signals around us, stopping the vitamin D receptor from doing what it should be doing. And I recommend you watch that particular talk there given by Trevor. But he actually says that, because vitamin D is so important for autoimmune system and immune regulation, that in the near future, it's going to be maybe essential that if we want to help people with their immune function, we're going to have to somehow block the electromagnetic fields from inhibiting their vitamin D receptor. Now, another well-established mechanism for how electromagnetic fields are affecting human biology is through what are called the voltage-gated ion channels. So every cell membrane around the outside of the cell is a cell membrane, and each cell membrane has gates in it. They're made of protein. They're protein gates, and ions such as calcium, potassium, magnesium, chlorine come in and out through those gates, and those gates are triggered by voltage. And it's understood that when calcium enters the cell doesn't like high levels of calcium, and it's constantly trying to pump it out. But electromagnetic fields can trick the cell gates so that calcium will actually enter through those gates, cross through them and those channels, and go into the cell. And this is the work of Panagopoulos and of Paul. You can go and look up those references talking about how the voltage-gated channels are tricked by EMFs. And this is a real problem because calcium's toxic to the cell. And then so when calcium goes into the cell when it shouldn't be there, you're getting, of course, the cell, of course, goes into high alert and then starts sending, the molecules we were talking about before. The reactive oxygen species are created to try and get rid of these excess calcium, and then that creates reactive oxygen species that there's too many of them. Which ends up with, and nitrogen species as well. They're there to try and disarm the calcium, but what happens is that we're overloaded. We get overloaded because we don't have then enough antioxidants to disarm those oxidative species that are created. And then we get this situation of oxidative stress inside the cell. And it's now known, like we said before, that oxidative stress is known to be an underlying cause of many inflammatory diseases. So here we've got inflammation is known to be underlying of cardiovascular disease, allergies, eye disorders, asthma, diabetes, Crohn's, infection, injury, psoriasis, obesity, lung cancer and arthritis, breast cancer. So, you might know someone who's struggling with obesity and they think it's all their own fault and they're trying everything to lose weight. But it could actually be, it hasn't got to do just with diet and exercise and sleep. It also has to do with inflammation. And one of those sources of inflammation could be the ubiquitous signals that are being sent through our bodies all the time. Calcium is also a neurotransmitter. So when you're getting extra calcium signaling, you're getting extra signaling through between neurons and essentially wiring the brain. And we really don't understand what effect that has. But there are studies showing effects on brains. But the fact that calcium is being sent as a signaling molecule when it shouldn't be is a problem. So this is a study showing DNA damage. It was called the Reflex study, done in Europe back in 2004. And what they did was they used a test called Comet assay. And what the Comet assay does is that it shows the damage done by how much DNA breakage there is by the size of the tail on the cell. So here we've got, this is from gamma radiation from nuclear radiation. So that's serious. We already know that nuclear radiation creates DNA damage, but this is actually from damage from 1.3 watts per kilogram of an 1800 megahertz. That's a telco signal. And you can see that there's quite a sizable tail there in that Comet assay. Almost, well, very similar to what's happening with nuclear radiation. And so this shows the damage to DNA proteins, cell membranes. potentially leading to cancer. Now, this study was done in 12 different institutions and it cost 3 million euros. Now, you would think that would have been world news, that, it would have come out on the news. Microwave signaling in our environment is potentially causing DNA damage. But instead of that, the guy who ran the study, Adel Koffer, he was smeared by a researcher called Lurchel, who accused him of making up his data. And it's pretty hard to make up your data if you're running it in 12 different institutions. But he was accused of that. And Paul Adel Koffer, it took 10 years for him to clear his name. Finally, almost 10 years. It was finally cleared in 2010, but vindicated in court in 2015. So instead of the world knowing this is a problem, the public being made aware of it, it was really just downplayed, and the scientists were smeared, and nobody heard about it. There have been some more recent animal studies also showing damage that lead to cancer. So one was the NTP study, the US National Toxicology Program, NTP, and that cost $30 million. It took many years to get started and run. And their study did near field, that is, they exposed rats like as if they were being exposed to cell phones, that is, up close. And they found malignant gliomas in the brain and schwannomas of the heart, and the effects were seen in male rats. There were some in females, but they were significant in males. Now, malignant gliomas are also found in studies with humans, with cell phone users, and schwannomas are cells that are involved in acoustic neuromas, that's human hearing and balance nerves. And so these results relate to problems that are being found in humans. And then a similar study was done by the Ramazzini Institute in Italy. The Ramazzini Institute is a very, very highly respected institute that's been, for decades and decades, been looking at the effects of various toxins on human beings, in particular in occupational settings. And they also found the same rare nerve tumours in male rats. But they studied more like, the rats were more like exposed to towers. So here we have two very, very well-funded, very well-respected institutions. This one finding effects in the near field, as if in phones. This one finding effects in the far field, as if being exposed by towers, but finding the same nerve tumours. And that should have been a problem, but what happened was industry and industry-friendly scientists came out and said, well, it's only rats. So they downplayed it. But we know that rats are used in health studies and toxicology studies in many fields of medicine. And this should have been a warning sign to humanity. On the topic of calcium signaling, it's known that calcium, it's a messenger in cells, and that viruses actually modulate calcium signaling to help themselves replicate. And the proof is that if you have calcium blockers, you can actually block the replication of certain viruses, these particular viruses here. And so, for example, influenza A, it uses those voltage-gated calcium channels I was talking about before to actually assist with entering the cell. So the viruses can open up these channels and help themselves to enter the cells and therefore to replicate. So here we have an interesting effect of the modern day world, that we've got these problematic viruses that want to go in through the calcium channels, and we've got to help themselves replicate, and we've got the EMF signals actually opening up those channels or promoting calcium moving through those channels. So it really needs to be looked at what's the interaction between these two things, because viral replication is a very big issue in the modern day world. Our melatonin is suppressed by EMFs, electromagnetic fields. This is more with power boxes and computer screens, this research, but you can see melatonin, everyone knows that it comes in and affects your brain, and, it's needed for sleep. You get melatonin from looking at the sun at the right times of day, and that'll help create more melatonin so that you'll sleep. But it's also a huge antioxidant in your body. So it's a free, that I was talking about before, those reactive oxygen species, those free radicals, melatonin will scavenge them. And it helps activate our immune system. It helps prevent DNA damage and cancer. In fact, it's been recently found that high-level doses of melatonin can be useful in helping to treat long COVID. And so if we muck around with our melatonin, we're actually, once again, mucking around with our health, and EMFs can do this. EMFs can also affect your sleep. There's been sleep studies showing this in workers, changing slow wave activity. It's not really very well understood, but it's known that there are effects, and therefore, that lead to sleep deprivation and daytime sleepiness. And therefore, and people around the world are having sleep problems. It's not a good idea to be running a sleep tracking app on a phone that's sending out signals that can actually be affecting your sleep. It's one of those things where the thing that's supposed to be helping you is actually making it worse, could be making it worse. So it's a bad idea. Don't keep your phone next to your bed at all unless there's an emergency. And you don't need a sleep tracking app. It would be better to have your phone out of the room or disabled so that you can reduce the risk of the EMFs affecting your sleep and your brain during the night. The heart is affected by pulsed RF. A lot of the signals are pulsed. That is, I said before, they're not nice smooth waves, but they're actually pulsed because when they're being sent, they have breaks in them for various technological reasons, and those breaks create pulses. And those pulses are right down in very, very low frequency ranges down near your alpha waves of your brain. And this is a study done by two Russian researchers in the late 1990s. They irradiated frog hearts with a radio frequency at 9.3 gigahertz, which they found was the close to the maximum absorption level of the frog hearts. And after 5 minutes exposure was when they found effects. And what effects we're talking about here is that there was a slowing of the heart rhythm, or there was a certain percentage of hearts that stopped. And here we got down here 6 to 10 hertz. So we're saying that's just the Schumann resonance, a bit lower. So that's around your alpha waves. We've got 80 to 90% of the frog hearts were affected, and 1 to 10 hertz, 70 to 80%. When you're going up a bit higher into the closer to when you're getting up to 100 hertz, it's less and less. So as you get down closer to brain waves, to the Schumann resonance, you're getting more effects on hearts. But the fact that hearts are stopping, that should be of concern. And this is a study done by Magda Havas where people were laid on a bed, and a modem was put into, cordless phone base. That's right, a cordless phone base station was put into a room with a wire running out to where they were, and they didn't know if the cordless phone was on or off, and their heart rate was measured, and you can actually see here on the graph, the heart rate was actually affected by the cordless phone, and that happened in 10 of the participants. And interestingly, it was the younger people that were more affected. So there's a study there you can go and look at. But Magda basically concluded that the autonomic nervous system is being affected by RF. And this should be of concern, especially, people will say, they get a cordless phone for their mother or their father's getting old, and they say, let's put this cordless phone next to your bed. So, if you need to ring me in the night, you can ring me. And they don't realize that the signals are being sent out from that base, that cordless phone base, could actually be affecting the hearts of their parents. And, if mum and dad die of a heart attack, they just say, they were old. but we could actually see that there's potentially effects on the heart from having that cordless phone in the room. Smartwatches and Fitbits recently came out that they could actually trigger heart attacks with interference with pacemakers. There's the study there. You can go and look it up. But there's also been anecdotal evidence around the world. People have shown from their Fitbits how they've got burns on their skin, and smartwatches, they've got burns on their skin. If you can go online and find those, and it's thought to be from the non-stop Bluetooth pulsing. So it's not a good idea to wear them. As I said before, the signals are pulsed and modulated. So the signals are pulsed and they're also modulated. So they're not nice, smooth sine waves. They're pulsed and they're digital, on, off, on, off, on, off. This is what a mobile phone signal might look like. There's kind of a burst and then down and then another burst. It's stronger while it's ringing, and then it's weaker once it's made the contact. So when you're making your phone call, keep it away from your head. Bring it up once the connection's been made. But these breaks at the places where this pulsing is happening is down here in the close to our alpha waves, closer to our delta waves, and closer to our gamma waves. And that's going into your brain all the time when you're using the phone, when you're when you're just talking. And just keep that in mind while using your phone. So try and keep it at a distance from your head. Use hands-free as much as possible. And there's an effect on the hippocampus, which is my concern, because the hippocampus is really important to memory and emotions. It's important to declarative, that it's factual memory, facts and things that have happened to you, spatial memory, your short-term to long-term memory transfer. So when you learn something like now, and then you go to sleep, and in your sleep, your hippocampus will help transfer that from short-term memory to long-term memory. So tomorrow you remember it. But if your hippocampus is damaged, that's not going to happen. And so if your hippocampus is damaged, you may not be able to do that transfer from short-term to long-term, or later on you may not just be able to retrieve things from long-term memory. And the changes, if you get changes and damage in the hippocampus, the inflammation and effects are underlying in hippocampal damage are underlying conditions such as Alzheimer's, depression, bipolar disorder, and inability to create memory. So this is a really important thing. But mobile phone signals have been shown to affect the hippocampus, at least in quite a few rat studies. And the type of studies that they do is they have this thing called a Morris water maze. So there's a platform, and they drop the rat inside this pot of water, and the rat has to kind of swim around and spatially find where the platform is, and they learn that. And of course that's learned by their spatial memory in the hippocampus. And so what they do is they have mice who are exposed to microwaves during or after that, while they're doing that learning, or after they've done that learning, depending on the experiment. And then they test them again to see if they remember. This is a study that exposed them from 6 minutes up to 6 months. And what they found was that the mice had been exposed for longer periods of time or to higher exposures, that they were unable to find the submerged platform that they once had learned. And when they sacrificed them afterwards, they found in their hippocampus cells, they were damaged, reduced in number, irregular, and that the mitochondria, this is the mitochondria, they're actually swollen. Instead, this is a normal one, and this is a swollen, kind of exploded one in the exposed rats. So they found marked alterations in the structure and function of the hippocampus, altered levels of neurotransmitters as well. And that corresponded to this disrupted learning and memory ability. So it's evidence that there's a correspondence between that damage, that hippocampal damage, and the disruption in learning and memory. And so that the authors concluded it's got to do with the exposures. And there's the paper there if you want to go and look at it. Now, a human study showing the effects of exposures was done by with adolescents, grade 7 to 9 in Switzerland. And this study, actually, what they did was they looked at how much students were being exposed by having this, what they call an exposometer, or exposure, portable exposure system that they wore around, so that they could actually see how much the students are being exposed by GPS and other and telephone communications and phones while they're just going about their daily life. And what they found, and they gave them a test, what's called figural memory, so a spatial memory test. So they showed them a whole lot of pairs of figures like this one and this one. And they had to learn this pair, that this one went with this one. And then after that, they showed them just one. So they might just show them this one here. And then they gave them 5 to choose from. And then they had to say which one out of the 5 went with it, and they had to pick this one. And if they picked that one, they were correct. And if they picked something else, they were wrong. And so that's their ability to create and remember spatial memory. So what they found was that the students who had higher exposures had a decreased ability to do this, okay, that their figural memory was inhibited, and that it was worse for the right side of the brain, which is where it's thought that there's more spatial processing going on. And and it was stronger for figural, that is spatial, than for verbal. So there's an effect on adolescence, and there's papers there. You can go and read them if you want. The mitochondria in the brain inside the mitochondria inside the cell, as people know, is a very important component of the cell, because it's where energy for the cell is created. And this is a military review in 2015, and the military don't muck around. So if they say something, we should be paying attention to it. And what they're saying is, as the 4th largest source of pollution after air, water, and noise, microwave radiation induces many biological effects. The brain is the most sensitive target organ, and mitochondrial injury occurs earlier and more severely than in other organs. We should be paying attention to this when we're thinking about the effects of all this technology on the developing brain and on all of our brains. This is the blood-brain barrier leakage I was talking about before, how the brain has a barrier to protect itself from toxins crossing from the bloodstream into the brain, into the where all the neurons and glia are. And Salford and his colleagues, for over a decade, from the late 1990s to the early 2000s, ran study after study after study showing that their blood-brain barrier was damaged and leaked, and with exposures, and that exposures allowed toxic substances such as albumin to leak into the brain. And this is a study showing, here we go, this is in the hippocampus, that's right, and this is in the cortex. And you can see there's black, dark and shrunken, what they call dark neurons, as well as dead neurons. And these studies are, for example, done 12 to 26-year-old week-old rats, is equivalent to human teenagers. And their results were found with very, very weak exposures. Like we were showing before, you can get results with very, very weak exposures. Well, these were way, way much lower, 1,000 times lower than the standards say is acceptable. And so you can see that damage to nerves. If you've got heavy metals in your blood system, then they can go across the blood-brain barrier and affect and become toxic to the brain. And they also found this damage occurred not just 2 hours after the exposure, but then they saw it again 8 weeks after the exposure. So it's incredible that a very short, low, weak intensity exposure can actually create such significant damage. And these researchers were very, very conservative. They didn't want to, extrapolate or exaggerate. Very, very thorough. Even when their funding was cut, they then used their retirement money to continue their research because they were so dedicated to it. But what they concluded was that after some decades of daily mobile phone use, a whole generation of users may suffer negative effects, perhaps early as in middle age. EMFs also affect neurotransmitters. These are all the different neurotransmitters, GABA, dopamine, serotonin, acetylcholine, that are affected by microwave radiation. And you can see effects such as depression appear in a couple of places there. So some of these issues that are happening with our young people today may not just be due to social media, due to the social effects, but it could actually be, and the addictions could actually be the signals themselves are affecting the neurotransmitters. And this needs to be investigated in much more depth than what it is. There's damage to the myelin sheathing. The myelin sheathing goes around the outside of a neurone. It actually, where it sits, it determines how the signal gets sent down the neurone. And it creates, if it disintegrates, of course, you can get disordered signaling. And it's been shown that 3 gigahertz, so that's in the range of our telco communications in pigs and rabbits, you get myelin degeneration. So this is another thing that needs to be looked at. Children's brains are more vulnerable. This is actually showing that if you've got a mobile phone here, in a child, this is how much in a 5-year-old child, this signal will actually sweep right across the brain, almost to the other side, as opposed to an adult where it's just going into the local region. Yet, currently admissible are all these types of scenarios where people put mobile phones right next to their babies, and they sit there in pregnancy with laptops. They say to their friend on the phone, listen to my baby moving, and they even give cordless phones and normal phones to babies themselves. This research was done in the late 1990s, and there's been more and more research done since. It should be an issue that is looked at very, very seriously. And overall, what we're finding is that there's been a decline in our children's health. This is a Blue Cross Blue Health Shield report of America, 2019 this was done. They looked at the decline of millennials and found where was the age where their health started to decline. Now, in our generation, we would expect, I'm showing my age here, but we would say your health is supposed to start to decline, about 60 or 70, but here in the millennials, it's declining at age 27. What is going on? There's increases in major depression, type 2 diabetes, behaviour and health problems, and 20% more for women. Now, of course, that study was repeated after COVID, and there were more issues that could be attributed to what happened during COVID. And this is a very sad picture about what was actually happening to our young people during COVID. They were isolated and they were stuck more and more on their devices at home and had more exposure from having to be homeschooled. But these figures are concerning, and this decline, and there's a recent paper showing a very similar result of that decline that's just come out recently. And finally, oxygen and water vapor, the quantum level effects right down at the quantum level, that the really, really high frequencies that are being sent in the 5G, the phase 3 5G, which is the really high frequencies above 12 gigahertz, they are up in the ranges that are close to where water and oxygen can absorb these signals, and it changes the behavior, the rotational energy of the molecule. That is of concern, and it needs to be monitored, and great protection needs to be put around that. We just don't understand the effects of 5G being sent by satellite across the world and but being bounced off the troposphere, in order for us to have ubiquitous connectivity. Just like to end this with a quote from a famous engineer named Robert Kane. He actually was a scientist and engineer who worked in the industry helping to design this technology. And he realized it was a problem. He came to realize it was a problem. And he wrote this book, which you can download, Cellular Telephone Russian Roulette. And this is his quote, which I'll leave with you. Never in human history has there been such a practice as we now encounter, with the marketing and distribution of products hostile to the human biological system by an industry with full knowledge of those effects. And he died of a brain cancer in 2002. So people always ask me, how do I keep myself safe? Well, there's many, many things to do. You can't get away from these signals. They are everywhere, but you can at least try and protect yourself because distance is your friend. So first of all, don't use your mobile phone straight up next to your head. Use hands-free. When you're not using it, this is the first thing. Keep airplane mode on, location services, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi hotspot off. And that's because your back of your phone has actually got 5 antennas in it. And you can't just turn it off. When you turn it off, all you're doing is turning off the software. You need to actually disable those antennas. Otherwise, they're going through your body, or the person next to you who's you're sitting next to in the bus or sleeping next to in your bed if you've got it on at night time. You need to disable all of those antennas because otherwise they're going through you continually. And what you do then is all you do is, so you pretend you're going into an airplane, you're going on the airplane, so you turn airplane mode on and then you turn everything else off. And you don't need location services most of the time anyway, because that's used for Big Brother to track you. You only need it for Google Maps. So leave it off most of the time. You don't need Bluetooth on at all. Wi-Fi hotspotting, only have it on when you need it on. But most of the time you can leave everything off and just have airplane mode on most of the time. And then when you want to check your messages, turn airplane mode off, check your messages, send your messages, and then put airplane mode back on. And you can do that several times a day. So after breakfast, lunch, dinner, afternoon tea, tell people I'm going to check in my phone several times a day. Just don't have it on all the time. You don't need it on all the time. You'll get your life back. But don't make phone calls in the car. That's a partial Faraday cage. And therefore, your phone has to intensify the signals to get out to reach the towers. So you shouldn't be using it while you're driving anyway, but stop the car, get out the car if you want to make a call. Don't carry your phone in your bra or your handbag. At home, you can actually wire everything. So you can wire your computer, turn off all of the Wi-Fi. You've got to do the same thing as you did with your phone, with your laptop and your iPad and your PC. People don't even know they've got locations services on those things and Bluetooth. Turn them all off. Wire things to your modem. Get a modem where you can actually turn the Wi-Fi off. Many of them you can't. You have to find out which ones you can. Pressing the button that says turn Wi-Fi off only turns off 2 of the antennas. Several of the others keep going. You need I use a IINet modem that many people do. Where we know we can actually, it's now TPG. Where you can actually turn off everything in the software and it really is off. You still have to take the 4G SIM card out. But anyway, you can do it. You just need to look into it. And if you are going to use hands-free on your phone, you can get earbuds that are actually made of air. So they're called earphones, not earbuds, not AirPods, but earphones. So they have wire up to here, and then from there on, they use air tubes so that it's air pressure that's carrying the sound. So you don't actually have an electric field going into your brain. If you've got either a corded normal earpods, sorry, or you actually got the Bluetooth earpods, especially the Bluetooth earpods, they put huge fields into your brain. Incredibly strong. Don't do it. Don't do it. The risks that we're seeing are too high. We don't know enough. There's potential risk of brain cancers, brain tumors. Don't do it. Just get the AirPods, the earphones. So if there's a tower beaming into your home, you're going to have to learn how to shield from it. In some instances, people have to move because it's too strong. Pulsed signals can't be shielded against easily. Towers can be shielded against because they're more random and not so pulse, but pulse modems from neighbours are problems. You can shield. You can get shielding fabrics and curtains. You need to look into that. You can get baby safe. Oh, don't use baby monitors. They're like modems. They put out huge signals, and there's the baby's brain being affected, and you're putting them at risk of great health risk. Just monitor your baby yourself. You don't need a baby monitor. Purchase your own handheld meters for testing everything. Turn your screens off at 10 p.m. because blue light is a problem. You don't want blue light. You actually don't want blue light, after 8 o'clock at night. So try and use amber lighting and turn your screens off so that you're not affecting your melatonin. They're the main things. There's other things you can do as well, but stop streaming as much as possible so you can download video rather than streaming it. And you can actually even wire your mobile phone now. You can wire it with a blue cable. With the iPhone, at least, you can wire it to your modem with an adapter and turn off all the Wi-Fi. But people always ask me, will this gizmo that I can stick on the back of the phone, will that protect me? And we can't know, but we don't have any evidence yet that any of these things work. And it's possible that they're being manufactured to placate the public. So in general, what I say to people is gizmos will not protect you. You actually have to do behavior change. You have to change the way that you live. Just like nowadays we have to filter our water, we have to buy organic veggies because the environment is toxic. We have to clean things up. The same thing with Wi-Fi. We have to, and EMFs, we have to become aware and clean things up in our environment for the sake of ourselves and our children.